Now that you've created your site in AQS, how do you create your monitor? Well, let's assume after you created your site, it was so exciting, you had to go to lunch, you completely logged off, and now you're logging in again, and you need to go back to that site and create a monitor at that site. The first thing you need to make sure is that you log in as your screening group, because if you log in as read-only user, that's fine. You can browse data from other sites, but if you log in as screening group access, then you can change information about your site. After you log in, it takes you to the main menu, or you could always go back to the main menu by clicking this icon at the upper right. But what we want to do is find the site that we entered and add a monitor to that site. The easiest way to do this is go to Maintenance, Site, and find that site. And when AQS forms open, they expect you to be in query mode. In other words, if you type in just one thing, for example, the tribal code here, and click Execute Query at the top, it will find all the records that are associated with this tribal code. And that's a convenient way to find something. However, you have to make sure that when you want to add data, you always start off by canceling the query. At this point, we want to execute the query to find that site that we entered. So I'm going to click Execute Query, and it finds this site that we entered, as well as another site, which I know because I can click this forward button here, and there's another site. And I see at the very lower left, record 2 of 2, and I can scroll back, and record 1 of 2. So I know that I have 2 sites here. And what I want to do now is add a monitor to this site, and I'm going to click Create Monitor at the very bottom. That opens up a different looking sort of form where the tabs are on the right side. What's nice about accessing the monitor form from the site form is that it fills in this information for you over here, including the site ID, and now you have to select the parameter code. This is very tricky because, for example, there are a lot of different parameter codes that have PM 2.5 in them, and it's very important that you get this right. So be sure to consult the AQS coding manual, and there's a hyperlink to that below the video. Contact your EPA regional person who assigned you the site ID, and you can always talk to us. I know that I'm monitoring for PM 2.5. So just to show you, let's type in PM 2.5 and then find. And you can see that there are a lot of parameter codes, including all these heavy metals, that are analyzed in PM 2.5. So that's not going to help us. Let's say I want to find the word raw within these search results, and there is our parameter code. And I also have verified this by double checking that this is the appropriate code. It's PM 2.5 raw data. I click OK. The reason that it is called PM 2.5 raw data is because this is not an FEM method. So this is PM 2.5 data. It's gathered with a BAM, but it can't be used to compare against the NACS because it's not an FRM or FEM. So it's coded as 88501. There's only one of these at this site, so I'm going to click 1 for POC1. At this point, we need to get to these other tabs, but they're grayed out. So the tricky thing about this form is that to access these other tabs, click in one of these fields down below, which aren't mandatory because you see they're not in bold, and then click Tab on your keyboard, and then that opens up these other tabs. And not all of these have required information to be added, but if you have information to be added, it's good to do so. The next tab is sample period, and this is important because you need to establish a beginning date. We're going to always use the year, month, day format. January 1st, 2013. We're going to leave end date blank because it's still monitoring. And now we're going to click Type Assignment. And if you click this drop down box, you can see there aren't very many choices. We're going to click Tribal, say OK, and again you have to have a beginning date. Great. Now you click Network Affiliations, and if you click the drop-down box, you can see that the selections are various networks. It's not mandatory, so I'm going to say cancel and not enter anything. Agency roles is very important. You have to have multiple roles. You're going to be collecting, and then make sure you put in your agency code, and then begin date. Then, in addition to collecting, you are your own PQAO in most cases. So we're going to say OK. That just corresponds to the old reporting organization. And then you can either click the drop-down box and find your agency, or you can type in your agency code, which you will already have memorized. And then all of these should have the same date. Then you also have to be certifying, because you're going to certify your data, and we'll talk about that in another video. And you have to be reporting, and you have to also enter that you are analyzing the data, because you will be analyzing the data, and the date. And once you've got those filled in, you can go to objectives, and you can have multiple objectives. Probably you will always want population exposure, and that is sufficient. And now for these, the urban area, these different metropolitan statistical area, these are indicators of what you're near. And the best thing to do is look at the selections in the drop-down boxes. And this is definitely not in an urban area. So we're going to click OK there. And you don't have to fill in any more of those. And then the frequencies are not important for continuous PM 2.5. Hallelujah. So we don't have to worry about that. This does not have a co-located PM 2.5 filter base monitor. This is very important. The choice of method corresponds to what kind of instrument you're using. So let's look at the drop-down box. And you can see that it's hard to see the description here. What you can do is hover your cursor over the separating line between the columns and then pull this over. I know my monitor is a MET1 PM 2.5 BAM, a BAM 1020 with a sharp cut cyclone. So I already know my code, but I want to verify it in this drop-down list. So we'll scroll through till we find a MET1 BAM 1020 with a sharp cut cyclone. And you can see that there is one that sounds exactly like that, but that is not the method code that we have been given. That's not the method code that the manufacturer gave us, and that's not the method code that the regional person told me I should use. This is why it's confusing, because if you keep scrolling down, 731 MET1 BAM 1020 with PM 2.5 sharp cut cyclone, that's the actual correct code, and it sure looks like the other one. So I'm going to say OK, and it fills in those. We have to make sure we put in the dates so that when we want to load data in AQS, it lets us, because we've told it it has already begun. Now, we don't have to add anything under exclusions. We don't have to add anything under pollutant area. We don't have to have anything under compliances, protocols, channels, or comments. Although, if you want to add them, you can. Comments are always good to add. So at this point, you've entered all the information you think you need. Go back to Monitor Basic and just check through. Yes, this is the right information. Go through and check. And then, how do you save this? On the upper left-hand corner is the Save icon. Click Save, and it will tell you if it worked. And you can see in the lower right, there's a little status bar that goes back and forth. And then on the lower left, it says transaction complete, record applied and saved. So you see it says 10 records. That's because this form is actually attached to multiple tables in AQS with all of this different information. And you can see that the status indicator here has changed to a P for production, meaning that this monitor is in production and you can upload data for it. So now you've created a monitor in AQS. Before you leave, let's just make sure it actually worked. So I'm going to go back out to the main menu, and now I'm going to go to Maintenance, and now I'm going to go to Monitor, and I'm going to try to find that monitor I just entered. So I'm going to enter just my tribal code, and remember this form, like other forms, opens up in query mode, but I want that, so I entered the tribal code, and now I'm going to click Execute Query, and we're going to see the monitor that we just added. So now we have entered a site and a monitor at that site.